everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Local Soccer Show, brought to you by Evangelista Sports, Canada's biggest and best soccer store. They have all the gear ready for the Euros this summer, whether you're an Azzurri fan, Spain, France, England, or any other country in Europe. Go to evangelistasports.com to check out their gear for the Euros or pass by their amazing store in Little Italy in Montreal on Saint Laurent. Thank you very much for your support. I'm really excited about our guest today. He's a former player, a current coach, has many years of experience, not only at the local level, provincial level, but also with the national team. He brings a wealth of experience, and I'm really glad I get to speak to him today. As you know, here at the Local Soccer Show, our goal is to learn from these wonderful guests who have lots of experience and can share some of their insights. And if everyone watching could just learn one or two little things from these amazing guests, it will make amateur soccer at the local level much better, and in the hopes of making kids passionate about the sport to want to play it more when they're in their teens and when they get older as well. So before we introduce our guest, we'll do a little intro video and then we'll get started. It's a great honor and a pleasure to welcome to the Local Soccer Show Carmine Isacco. Thank you so much. He's the director of soccer at Vaughan Soccer Club. Welcome to the local Soccer Show, Carmine. How are you?
I'm well, thank you very much for having me. I know the show has brought a lot of influence around our grassroots and our soccer history, which is important. So, thank you for having me.
No problem. It's a pleasure. So, Carmen, before we get started, why don't we go a bit down memory lane and share with us where did you play soccer as a kid?
Well, I grew up in a place called Scarborough, where a lot of
Okay.
talented players, lots of talented players came out of. Um, Dwayne De Rosario, a lot of other big players came out in the '80s generation, the '90s generation. I won't say the '70s generation because I might age myself, but yeah, it was a hub of soccer. It was a hub of cultural assimilation at the time. I got there when I got to my clubs in Scarborough. It was obviously ethnic based. I played for a team called Midland Caledonia. I was probably the only Italian on the group at the time, filled with Irish and Scottish, but just a wonderful assimilation. Bound together by the symbiotic relationship of soccer and culture. Um, and it was a great learning experience for me, not just about the game but about people. And I think at times we forget that growth, especially in our younger ages, that we were surrounded with so many different people that different became normal to us. I myself uh, ended up playing in Scarborough, and then with a place called Centro Scuola Azzurri, which was run by Mr. Alberto Di Giovanni, which had a great relationship with the Italian community, which had a great relationship that led me into Toronto, Italia, and some different professional opportunities. But uh, so it was a very good youth growth there, and it was just a plethora of learning what for me what culture and soccer was. I didn't realize the differences honestly between cultures until I got to University of Maryland, and I realized what it is to have differences, because I didn't understand it. I mean, that's what I grew up as a youth, and then when I got into the ideas of segregation that came with where I was in the Washington D.C. area and all those things, it kind of surprised me. It kind of
Yeah.
surprised me that I went there with a fellow Scarborough player, a black player, and he ended up joining the Black Student Union and having all these different mentalities. But I'm getting a little political, I know. But it was just incredible to me that there was this idea of segregation, how we weren't all together. Because when we played the game in Scarborough, it was all of us together. It was all of us enjoying each other's differences. And I say that with total sincerity because that's what shaped my childhood, and that's what I remember as far as growing up in such a cultural assimilated place.
Yeah, and you know the way it is in Canada, we are a multicultural country. So even in myself growing up, I do admit most of my friends were Italian, but we also had played soccer with different people from different parts of Europe as well and other nations in the world. So I do agree with you. It is something where, you know, I mean, you shouldn't have this thing with this segregation. It's really something that hopefully going forward in 2024, it is something that we don't want to see anymore either, because it should be a sport that unites us all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's well said. I think that it
Yeah.
is a sport that unites us all, and I think that especially in our country, without the cultures and without the different ideologies, we wouldn't be as special as even you look at the group now. You look at the Alfonso Davies of the world, which is with his African roots, and Jonathan David, and Tejan Buchanan with his Jamaican roots,
Yeah.
and Luria, who with his Ghanaian roots. It's all within.
Yeah.
It's all part of who we are as a soccer nation, not just the nation itself.
Yeah, exactly. So, Carmen, I believe you played in your senior career. You always played as a goalkeeper. Was that the same also in your youth, or did you also play as a player?
I fancied myself a center midfielder growing up as well,
Okay.
but ultimately it was mostly Carm going net, Carm going net, Carm going net. So it was a goalkeeping reality that kind of got me noticed. I mean, the group that kind of we grew up together with. Obviously, well,
Yeah.
Paulo Ciccarelli. um Roberto Marinero, myself, other goalkeepers that kind of had some success in the old CSL, or some of them deciding as me and Robert did to go south into school in the States. It led me to some incredible opportunities. One of my opportunities was playing with Mauro Biello, who's currently the assistant coach with Jesse Marsch, and we developed a good relationship
Mhm.
that kind of came to the forefront recently as I kind of joined the Canadian staff again, and it was a great experience, and I'm thankful for the opportunities, and hopefully I've done some right things to earn the respect of Mauro as a coach and as a person.
Absolutely. And we'll touch on that with the national team a bit later. What I wanted to go now in the next segment is regarding your coaching career. What made you want to follow that path once you finished as a player?
Well, I've had some incredible coaches in my life that, for me, the two things that are universals in my life are you have to do things with ability and you have to do things with integrity. And if you think about the coaching culture, there's not a lot of people that have both. But I was lucky to have some youth coaches. One named Emilio Hernandez, Uruguayan gentleman with so much passion, had a had a good career in the coaching. This is obviously not noted in social media because Emilio, still going strong, is about 80, 85. So, but he had those abilities to motivate people. He had that integrity. He had that teaching ability. For me as well, I remember nights upon nights him finding tennis courts or lights in the tennis area because it wasn't so available back then, to just work with me, and people like that were motivators, and I think he gave back. And then as I moved on in my professional career, I met a gentleman called Bob Gansler, who coached the 1990 World Cup team, the U.S. team, and he he eventually moved in '96 to play coach the Milwaukee Rampage, just in the beginning and of the MLS, but this was the USL, which turned into the A League. And because I grew up in the States and I played in the ACC at University of Maryland, that connection brought me to him. And as far as preparation, as far as mentality, as player management, I think that he was far bar none one of the best that I've ever seen. He ended up moving on, and we ended up winning an A League championship in 1997 with the Milwaukee Rampage under his leadership, under his tutelage, and he got back into the MLS shortly after that. But I took lessons from him on and off the field that lasted with me forever. And in the meantime, I did my licensing and my preparation and my formalizing of ideas, and I developed my own ideas as well through the USSF. And I took a lot of Gansler's lessons and took them with me moving forward. Eventually, by my third year, I was a player coach with Gansler, and then he left for the MLS, and he had a lot of success in the MLS, winning an MLS championship with Kansas City. And I kind of came home. I kind of drifted home after a little bit and ended up with an old friend in Peter Pinizzotto. Peter and I, who was an assistant coach with Nick DeSantis at Montreal as well. Peter and I went way back for Toronto Italia days, and he's one of the other gentlemen that I would say was a massive influence on me as far as integrity and ability and just selflessness. Obviously, in the trenches or as a pro coach or as a national coach, there's a lot of sacrifices. There's a lot of passion and there's a lot of sacrifices, and I think both those things are very important. And when someone who gets, and a lot of coaches in the trenches now that we don't hear about every day, that have to sacrifice so much, whether it's family or time or energy or money and funding. When you have that connection or you have that ability, it's just so much more important for their players or their student athletes or whatever you'd like to call them. It's so much more impactful. So Peter was an impact on me. He brought me in as a player coach with the Toronto Lynx. So I was his assistant, plus I worked with the goalkeepers. And I had a fantastic time as a player and coach, and we had a lot of success. It kind of springboarded me moving forward. I had a lot of opportunities to go to the U.S., NCAA and all that, but I kind of felt that home was home, and I could try and make an impact at home. And I had a great kind of beginning, a great building process for a club called CS Azzurri. And as I became technical director of that club, I was lucky to have players like some incredible players like Junior Hoylett involved, Stevie Vittoria, Andrea Lombardo. There's Jamie Peters, all national team players. Some played in the highest levels in England. Who else was there? There's other players that found Michael Luke, who ended up playing with the Hong Kong national team. So many Tristan Murray, Murphy Weirder, players that had so much. Richard Asante, who played MLS. So many players that had so little but achieved so much. And I kind of grew very close to that player that CS Azzurri attracted. Whether it was the Jane Finch corridor child who had nothing except for passion, sacrifice, and the will to compete and fight. And also those North York Italians, because our club was predominantly North York. And thank God of the lessons I learned, and thank God that the people I surrounded myself with, that we had a lot of opportunities to give, a lot of opportunities for them to move on and see the highest levels. And eventually, out of their good habits and their good work, players like Junior Hoylett and players like Lombardo and players like Jamie Peters, and the list is so big that they eventually did did things that were very special,
Yeah.
and still are, and still are. If we see Junior Hoylett still with our national team program.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So before we continue and discuss what you're currently up to, I wanted to just take a step back. And I'm glad to learn about your playing career as a goalkeeper. I'm currently coaching my son's U10 team, and I've had experience coaching my older son as well in this young age range. And one of the struggles we have as coaches is with the kids when it comes to the goalkeeping position. It's not a position many kids initially really want to play in. And then because it's very difficult and they're probably a bit scared too to play in that role. And also, I find what I've noticed is, and that's what I want to get your opinion on, is there seems to be a lack of training for that position. I know they're still young from, U8 to U12, they're still learning, but just your opinion and how much training you think at that age range a goalkeeper should have. Let's start with that you
I
think would
mean,
help them learn and get more comfortable in the role.
yeah, I mean, obviously the enjoyment is really important. Kids learning to throw themselves, kids learning and without the tactical or the technique intricacies of everything. There's kids that like to that are brave, that are like to throw themselves at the ball, they like to move, and that's important, and that's fun for them. That's fun for them, and when you add details. And then again, these kids are sponges. They take little details, and your hand movement, or your power step movement, or your lateral movement. All those little things. It doesn't take a lot of time, and it's not as important as their will and their enjoyment level. At U10 or even younger, um, but I think that it's important to give them the beginning senses of a structure. So we have grassroots soccer coaches at the Vaughan Soccer Club that include goalkeeping training.
Okay.
So whether it's once a week and the ability to go twice a week, they're
Mhm.
learning those intricacies of falling. They're learning those intricacies of how to roll properly, how to move properly, the acrobatics of it, the safety of the acrobatics of it, the hand movement, the hand shifting, without taking away that enjoyment. I know there's so many techniques and schools of goalkeeping right now, but I remember growing up, and I had a coach, a Serbian coach who runs Rush Soccer Club right now, um, Bob Pavlovic, Slobodan, and he even at my I was 18 probably, moving into the Toronto Italia, the National Soccer League professional starts. He was about that aerobics. He was about that acrobatics. He was about that ability to leap better, to move better, to be vertical and lateral to the floor. All those things not only developed technique, but it developed strength, and it developed proper movements. But up until then, I really had no formal training. Up until then, if you ask Paolo Ciccarelli, if you ask Paul Dolan and Pat Onstad, they really didn't have formal training until they got into those latter stages of their teens or early adult years, which obviously made a massive difference. And how you move your feet, how to move your arms, whether it's a taco palo, which is the Italian and the Dutch way to goal keep, versus what Neuer does now, which I can't even understand the new systems of goalkeeping, and I don't pretend to understand. But yeah, for me it was angles, and it was body movement in comparison to the ball. But I think that the beginning stages at U10 is important. Is important to give them that individual technique direction, but not as important as the enjoyment, not as important as the acrobatic about part of it, the ability to do somersaults, the ability to jump and roll sideways, the ability to do all those things are incredibly important. Are incredibly important. I mean, for me, it would be kids that motor skill development courses would be for players and goalkeepers all the time, and goalkeepers would even be involved in gymnastics courses for me, as far as I'm concerned, because they have to have that ability to leap. They have to have that coordinated ability to move, to move vertically and to do all those things. That's for me, and I think that most of the time in the club system should be spent with the ball. But other than those times with that you don't have, I say, hey, motor skill development. Have a specific motor skill development coach. Have a specific motor skill development program. Have a specific goalkeeper program that would include not only the motor skill but also the gymnastics, also that acrobatics part.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. And now, speaking of player development, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Canada Club licensing program and the long term player development model that was put in place by Soccer Canada. It's been a few years now, this, and we all like to ask our guests what they think of it. And if there's one thing you can share that you like about the program, and
Well, I
one
think
thing
I,
you
I
think
think
it
it
could be improved.
I think it's going through a transitionary period as well. Align with CONCACAF, if and I think that makes sense. But there needs to be a level of flexibility that I don't see.
Okay.
A level of because for me in soccer, there's no black and white. There's no right and wrong.
Yeah.
There's different ways to train a young player that's in the first touches program to the U8s, U9s in the festival programming, all that stuff. I think there's different ways to do it, and I think that uh, these courses at times provide black and white scenario, which for me is absolutely absurd. It's absolutely absurd. So there should be something called the gist or the idea. Where yes, there's I won't even call them universals. There's some things that should be applied, but it's not arithmetic. It's molding and developing the mind through these ideas. Um, Programs that I do include in our club all the time are like Corver's programs, because it's part of their motor skill development, it's part of their individual development. And in our Vaughan grassroots programming, we do move from individual continuously throughout the grassroots, small group programming, which includes 2 and 3, which includes some tactical awareness between groups 2 and 3 up to U12, and then we have a little bit of a bigger group, but most of it is concentrated on the individual group. So these courses need to be geared to providing concepts and tools. For me, concepts and tools to give to our grassroots players. I know the children's license has gone into some incredibly complex stuff, whether it's child psychology, whether it's I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. But some of it may be uh, superfluous, maybe unnecessary, because it defeats the purpose of teaching disposition, or as a youth coach, the most important thing is for you to smile. For a grassroots coach, the most important thing for you is to smile and gain the trust of that little boy or girl, to play. It's playing. So you have to be a mentor to playing, a mentor to bringing out that creativity and that individuality, and you are the first steps toward whether Messi enjoying his career and wanting to go forward, or crying home every day. So these are the most important things. So when we talk about the licenses and the the first licenses, I think that we have to be flexible. I think that our teachers, our facilitators must be not to the point of flexible, but flexible in their perspective, flexible
Okay.
in giving their perspective, understanding that the most important things in the grassroots is to encourage them to play. That for me is so important.
Yeah, I agree with you, because we always forget that the kids, the reason they want to play is to have fun. And I find where it gets unfortunate with some coaches is even at a young age, they want to win. And it shouldn't be about that. Winning is important. Don't get me wrong. However, there should be, you know, the kids enjoying themselves. And if they get a win, it's like a bonus, not you shouldn't have fun only because you win. So you're definitely
Exactly.
right on that. Yeah.
Yeah, the winning
Yeah.
mentality and the playing mentality, and you see teams in the grassroots, and I know in Ontario we have no scores, no standings. I mean, which is neither here nor there because the kids know the scores anyway.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
so
agree.
but the point is they play differently, and it's got to be instilled in the minds of our coaching facilitators that they should not be afraid to play.
Yeah.
I have this discussion with parents, or why don't they kick it? Why don't they just be? And why they have to be? They cannot be afraid to make mistakes. They cannot be afraid to commit mistakes because a lot of times, even as you get older, you see many players with a lot of talent, but they omit to do things rather than commit to do things. So a lot of times, kids omit to try and dribble that player because they're supposed to play two-touch soccer, or they're supposed to move it here and there, and there's patterns of play at U10 and 11 and 12, which is ridiculous. So they omit to take someone on, or they omit to try and cut someone back and go backwards to the goalkeeper, or cut someone back and try to make them, or do those things that for me are very important in developing that individual player.
Yeah.
And then as we move forward, we developed a small group, which still needs those individual qualities, but in a small group mentality. Yeah. So, and then we grow to bigger groups. But
Yeah.
again, I'm talking a little too much, but it's so important to let these kids not be afraid to play the one versus one game all over the field.
Yeah. I agree with you. And that's a message I try to tell my kids as well, is to be brave. Don't be scared of the ball. I'd
Yeah.
rather they dribble and lose it than just boot it because they're afraid that they're gonna lose the ball or get scored on. So it is something that we definitely need to pass on as a message to the kids so they could enjoy themselves. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now, Carmen, let's talk about your experience when you played against CF Montreal in the 2023 Canadian Championship. I believe you were the first semi-pro club to ever face an MLS side. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. In the Canada
Yeah.
Cup, we're the first semi-pro to play in MLS at Saputo Stadium. What a wonderful environment there. I was there before as an assistant with York Nine at the time when we played, and probably deserved a better result, to be honest. We tied at home and then lost 1-0 at Stade Saputo. Yeah, it was. You know what? An experience where, not that I wasn't prepared for the level. I was prepared for the level. Our boys were prepared for the level. But it's exactly, sometimes it's counterintuitive of what I just said, where we created some good chances, some very good chances, and we did lose the game 2-0 regardless of the score. We did create very good chances, but I wish if I go back, I wish
Hmm.
that we were a little more brave, a little more brave. Obviously, people will talk about the one player makes more than our whole budget, blah 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 blah. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean anything that we're amateur versus an MLS team. It doesn't mean anything. Our boys, some of them had the mentality that they're going to go out. They went out and they weren't afraid of losing. They weren't afraid of making mistakes. And we were brave, like you
Yeah.
say. Sometimes coaches like myself ruin that, but because we end up setting up blocks and low blocks, and we forget about, we develop, not that this is wrong, but we develop game plans that are gonna exploit their lack of defending in transition, or spaces where we can exploit. That's absolutely useful. But in a game where I look back and I'm like, we were never gonna win this game. We were never gonna, but if I gave them, and not that I ever said that to our players, but if I
Yeah.
gave them that, if I gave them that relentlessness to go forward and to be brave and go and play without the tactical component, then I think we it would have been a little bit more enjoyable. I remember one day I was with the U20s with Valerio Gazzola, okay, who I respect Valerio so much. What a great coach. And this was one of my younger days, and I was, lots of energy and all that stuff. And
Mhm.
we're playing Mexico to qualify for the U20 World Cup. And we went into the meetings, and Valerio put up this system, and it's kind of brings me back to this game against Montreal, and we had, a five back system, no really point of reference. Um, it was a defend first mentality, which, again, for the sake of result, to the sake of what we have to do, we had to take care of things. I looked at Valerio and I said, you know what? If we do this, we may lose the game 1 or 2-0, no problem. But I'd rather lose the game 6-0 and go at them and find a
Yeah.
situation where we press, find a situation where we can say, hey, we did our best to assert ourselves and be impactful. Do you understand? So, and
Yeah.
I go back to my younger years and I said, I wish I was like that during that game. I was more pragmatic. And yes, you have to be pragmatic. But Mexico won the World Cup that year, by the way, with the
Yeah.
U20s, and they were a fantastic group. But I looked at Valerio and I said, let's change the landscape of this game. Let's change it that Canada doesn't have to have a defeatist attitude all the time. They have to be a proactive attitude. Let's go. Let's go at them. Let's play a regular system with 2 points of reference, whether it's a 4-4-2 or 3-1-4-2, however we wanted to plan it. Let's go. Um, we chose not to, and we ended up losing 3-0. And but for me, I think that as we adapted that mentality, and Herdman saw the strengths, and Jesse Marsch is seeing the strengths of our team, being proactive and being on the front foot, as they say. I think that's important to give our athletes that confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned this because it ties into my next question. We saw this year the semi pro club Saint Laurent that beat Halifax of the CPL. That's the first time a semi pro club advanced to that stage of the Canadian Championship. And I felt that although when they played TFC, the aggregate score wasn't very flattering. I have to give props to Saint Laurent, who I believe did exactly what you were just saying. They could have, quote unquote, parked the bus and played a style where they say, we know we can't win. We're just semi pro. This is TFC, the professional team, and try to limit the damage. But I find they just kept playing, even though they obviously outclassed given the talent and the resources and the training. It's really not fair in terms of both clubs when they faced each other. But I have to give them credit. They did try to just keep playing their style. I didn't see them alternate their philosophy of how they played, even though they got scored on whatever it was. I know it was a high aggregate, not flattering, but style of play, I give them props for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I think as CSS Laurent, Saint Laurent was an example of what exists in Quebec soccer, and what an example of what we're missing in the CPL massively. Um, Again, you look at players, look at Bambito, look at Kone, look at these players that came out of that. I had the pleasure of working with Abzi and Mo Farsi. These are players that they need the chance to be exposed. And a lot
Yeah.
of those players on CSS Laurent was those are players that can play CPL without a problem. Some
Yeah.
of them, and put them in that environment, put them in some of them in the MLS environment. They will grow and they will be very successful. So My best thing that happened throughout that, and obviously it came at the loss for a good friend of mine, Patrice Geyser, with Halifax, but it was a statement that Quebec needs to be part of this CPL. That Quebec
Yep.
should not be identified by CF Montreal alone. They need this. They need this because there's so many players in so many different cultural pockets of Montreal that can be professionals. No questions asked. And this is what opened up not my eyes, but a lot of other people's eyes. Because when I was with York Nine, we played against Blainville, and after that game we played at Blainville, our season was just started.
Hmm.
I begged Jimmy Brennan at the time, who was our GM and manager, to sign two players that were at least two from the Blainville team that were difference makers. One was Vaudril. I'll never forget. To the day I left, I was always trying to sign him because of his leadership abilities, because his qualities as a player. For me, there's players like that in the PLSQ, and I
Hmm.
think that, and there's a lot of players that should be. It's just a statement after statement after statement that these players need to be identified and put into the CPL, hopefully with a Quebec organization. But I
Yeah.
agree with you. Them being on the front foot, them taking the game at times, especially in the first 20 minutes against TFC, at the very historic Claude Robillard Stadium too, was
Yes.
was
Yeah.
was not only nostalgic, but it was refreshing, and nice to see.
Yeah. And from a macro level, I think it's also nice to see the growth of the sport in Canada with the CPL, and now the semi pro league got a bit of spotlight as well. So I'm hoping all this will help trickle down also to the amateur level as we raise the standards and we take the sport a little more seriously. I'm hoping it will trickle down that even at the local clubs, there will be some standards you want to meet to have the players really develop. So when they get to 12 and 13 years old, they could be noticed as well and hopefully join some academies and really develop properly. So when CPL needs players, and then even at the MLS level or semi pro, for example, you will have a nice pool of players to choose from, like Canada does already with hockey. So I'm hoping soccer, I know it won't reach the level of hockey given our environment with the winter in Canada, but I think there's a big opportunity for growth. Even with the women's team now, that there's finally a professional women's team, all this ecosystem, I'm thinking it's going to be great for the sport going forward. And I hope the momentum maintains.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's brilliantly said. I think that's brilliantly said. But the one thing that we need to do is work together.
Yeah.
Work together to make sure that this happens. Work together so there's more academies and there's more ideologies of the game. We don't have to have one funneled system for the Canadian
Yeah.
way, or we can have the York United way. We can have the Hamilton Forge way. The whatever Quebec team in the CPL comes in, plus the TFC Academy, plus all those things. But we should have those ideologies, those mentalities come through. Whether it's the ultimate level of League One or PLSQ, or the
Yeah.
ultimate level of CPL, there has to be that pathway that needs to be rearranged, and there has to be some consistency in that pathway and how to get there as well. But those are things that are very important.
Yeah.
The next layer we talk about in Ontario, we have something called the OPDL. You know, in concept, it's okay. In concept, it's okay, but the reality is it's not touching all the players that it should touch, because it probably costs $5,000 average for a kid to play. And you go into some regions in whether it's Jane Finch corridor, whether it's different communities. You know how many players
Hmm.
get left out? You know how many players are left out of that OPDL system because of the socioeconomic reasons, not the football reasoning.
Right.
So this stuff is something, and those kids should be allowed to be part of that layer, but there should also be a next layer that comes from the grassroots system, because the
Yeah.
grassroots system for these kids is attainable to play, is attainable to get identified. And if they're one of the top 60, 80 players, 90 players, 100 players at the U13, they should be automatically moved to a second layer, not only
Yeah.
OPDL, but a higher layer, or a layer that's gonna be fed by OPDL. So there's so many ideologies, there's so many ways to fix things, but if, unfortunately, our reality is that a poor man's sport, you know, by some of the poorest of the poor have been our best incredible ambassadors, is now being taken over by the almighty dollar,
Dollar.
and
Yeah.
the almighty business plan versus the plan of developing footballers and developing players, and giving kids every opportunity to be successful.
Yeah, I hope that will also change because if we do have more investment in the sport, you would hope it would lessen the cost to have more of the kids playing because it shouldn't be a pay to play system, like you said. So hopefully things will be better in the future in
Or
that
at
aspect.
least
Yeah,
reasonable. At least
reasonable.
reasonable.
Yeah, to expect it totally free, that's not realistic, but
Yeah.
to make it reasonable, I do agree.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, Carmine, you got to work with Mauro Biello when Herdman left the national team to go to the TFC. What are your thoughts on him remaining with the national team as an assistant? And also your thoughts on Jesse Marsch becoming the new national team coach for the men's team.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been involved in the program for, like I said, I worked with Valerio at the U20s, which was an incredible experience, incredible human being, incredible coach. I think he's still involved with the Quebec and the Canadian soccer licensing program. Um, I've had the chance to work with the Pan Am Games with Benito Floro, another exceptional, for me, just exceptional human being, exceptional teacher with different ideas. If you talk to Benito about grassroots soccer, and he would say we need tactics at 10 years old. We need tactics, and
Yeah,
the individual, because he says I have to spend so much time doing individual and two groups of two tactics that they should have had the base level. So it's a great ideology
yeah,
that you see, and his mentality, which what just a genius for me. Coach Real Madrid, genius for me. Anyway, now I had this opportunity in this transition with Mauro, who I have a ton of respect for. He was a product of a little bit of Benito, a little bit of Octavio, a little bit of John Herdman, a little bit of all these things, a little bit of the realities that he had in his footballing career, which was a very good career. All these little realities came to a sum of who Mauro Biello was. And again, if I relate to two values that I value the most, the integrity and the ability, Mauro had both. Mauro had both, and uh, I think was very humble in his approach. Um, why a good perspective on things, and very complete.
yeah,
I think he developed some incredible habits from John Herdman, some incredible habits about what it meant to be complete. And I say complete. I think there's situations where are overdone and becomes bells and whistles versus
hmm,
substance. And I think Morrow understood and took what the substance was, and led a team in tough situations. It was tough situations, and did very well with this group. Very well to continue this group. Very well to make the transition for Jesse. And I think Jesse doing what he did was very pragmatic, very intelligent to keep Mauro Biello, 1,000%, because Mauro not only worked with these guys, for 10 days at a time, but he worked with these guys every day, talking to
yeah,
them, earning their respect, whether they were playing games, whether he called them after a game. There was that individual attachment
yeah,
that good on Jesse for realizing that. Good on Jesse that realizing that he had a good relationship with the players, and I think that it's incredibly important that he kept him. Okay, so I think it was important for Jesse to realize there needs to be a continuity. Obviously, he's going to bring his own mentality, and they had worked together as well when Jesse was with Montreal. So they had a good relationship there as well. So yeah, I think it's for me it was a no brainer. And the few conversations I did have with Jesse, the one conversation I had with Jesse was I applauded him for having the foresight and the humility to keep Mauro Biello on.
Yeah.
So
And it's also a testament to Mauro as well to want to remain on when he was the interim. It's sort of like he's taking a step back, but he still wanted to help out the national team. And us, obviously, in Quebec, we're proud of Mauro that he's there. And the fact is, Italian origin for us in the Italian community, it's a big honor that we have someone like him involved with the national team. So it says a lot about him to want to continue because who knows? Maybe there were opportunities he could have pursued. I don't know. Like, I don't know Mauro personally, just by reputation in the community, he's very highly regarded. So it wouldn't surprise me if he would have had an opportunity to be a head coach. I don't know, at a CPL club, an MLS. Who knows what was there? But the fact that he stayed, it really says a lot about him, how much he cares about growing the sport in Canada and giving back to the national team.
I remember our one camp we had just before we played Trinidad. It was his kind of motto. His was Canada first, Canada first, and he exemplified that. He exemplified Canada first. He exemplified and kind of reminded all the players that yes, we probably have the three, four, maybe three most expensive players in CONCACAF on our team, but Canada first. And I think that type of pride, that type of his baby, like he's been part of it for so long.
Yeah.
Olympic team, youth teams, World Cups, all these things. He's been through so many personalities, but he's been the mainstay. Right after he left Montreal, pretty much. But for him, it was a no-brainer. For him, it was just an issue of pride to be part of it.
So let's move on to the last part of our interview. This is the fun part. Just some quick, rapid fire questions, and then we'll end the show. So, when you were growing up, did you have a favorite player? And if so, who was it?
The first player that comes to, if I say Dino Zoff, the 1982 World Cup was probably, I was the first one riding my bike on the 401 to get to St. Clair. Yeah, so back then that was it. But then as I grew, it was the Dino Zoff, Walter Zenga. Those were two of my kind of favorite players growing up. I still have
Yeah.
Zenga's nose.
Who's your favorite team?
Inter, sono interista.
Oh
From
no,
the
I
day
guess now we could just end the interview,
I,
Carmen. No, I'm
see
just
that
kidding.
Maldini shirt. The irony
Yeah.
is 1993. Irony of this is 1993. AC Milan played Torino in Washington D.C. for the Coppa the Cup Winners Cup, the
Yeah.
league winners and the Italian. Yeah. So they did their training sessions at the University of Maryland. So at the time, Fabio Capello, I was the translator. So I was hanging out with Maldini. I was hanging
Okay.
out with
Nice.
Baresi, with at the time Costa Curta, all those guys. Brian Laudrup, which was an amazing Boban, Savicevic. Anyway, what a team! What a team! And he comes to me and he says, "Look." The goalkeeper at the time was, oh my God, the tall guy. Help me out. Anyway, he says, non si piace allenare.
Rossi?
Rossi, Sebastiano Rossi. Yes.
Sebastiano Rossi, yeah.
So he looks at and he goes, no, non piace allenarsi. So he says, we need a keeper. I said, can you train? I said, sure. Are you kidding me? So 1993, I'm training with AC Milan, and at that time they were the world's best team,
Yeah.
And at the end of the session, I'll never forget this. They did some finishing, and I'm flying everywhere, making saves, and I'm a cocky little SOB. And I'm getting in their faces. I'm like, this is the great Milan. This is the great Milan. I'm telling them about. And then he stopped everything. Capello stopped everything. Said, guys, okay, go stretch. He said to me, you stay. So I don't know if you guys know Capello, what kind of player he was. So he put a ball down here. He says, okay, come. And he says, I'm going to put this ball off that post and in that corner. I was like, okay, yeah, go.
Yeah.
Boom, bing, and exactly
In.
where he put it. Hey, he did this not once, but about 5 times. He told me
Wow.
exactly where he was going to put it, and he put it
Yeah.
that exact spot. So I don't know if you guys ever watched the Flintstones. When Fred Flintstone leaves Mr. Slate's office and he comes in big and he leaves like a little mouse,
Yeah, yeah.
that, that was me. I came in 6'3" and I left
Yeah.
2'1".
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow,
but
what an incredible story.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was, and I had a great week with them, and like it was great to just be part of that. I had no idea what they would be, well, what they were and what I did, but what they would become. Just
Yeah.
incredible people too,
Yeah,
incredible
yeah,
people.
yeah. So tell me, in terms of coaches, is there a coach that inspired? I know you mentioned earlier when you started, like what about now or in recent years? Is there like a type of coach that you enjoy their style or how they work?
The obvious choices, but I mean, I probably I like Mourinho because of his. I do like Mourinho because of I'm an Interista. He won the
Yeah.
tripleta.
Right.
I don't think AC Milan ever won the tripleta, the
Yeah.
triple. No.
Thank you for reminding
Yeah,
me,
I
Carmen.
remind you
Thank you.
that.
Thank you.
But that's one of the reasons I just love his.
Yeah.
I love the defensive tactics of stuff. As far as a
Hmm.
manager's concerned, for me, Carlo Ancelotti's the best. And right now, if you look at systems and the entertainment of the game, Alonso at Leverkusen, the way they played their three-box three, and the way they move and they're without great players, without great players, with good players obviously, but without great players, and I think that for me is right now, other than Pep Guardiola's Man City, who's the best team in the world. Um, I think Alonso would be the one that you would kind of look at and say, beautiful,
Yeah.
right? Beautiful. So
And what about your future? Do you have any aspirations to
yeah, I
move
mean,
up in terms of the level from where you're at now, or you're happy where you're at? Where do you see yourself, let's say, in a couple of years from now, in terms of your
yeah,
career aspirations?
no, I again, I would have loved some opportunities in the CPL before, um,
Okay.
but I'm in a university system, so the one thing, the great thing about the university system is about it's solid. You know, it's a solid life for a family. It's a
Yeah.
solid life for and then in the academia. I love York University. I've been there for a long time since 2007. Prior to that, I was at University of Toronto. So I like the university system. I like the type of student athlete that comes out of it. So I really enjoy my
Mhm.
time there. And looking back on how things have evolved, I'm blessed to be there. I was with TFC 2007, little bit of 2008. You see the good, the bad, the ugly of the
Mhm.
professional game. Then transitioning to national team experience, which were fantastic, and York Nine at the time.
Yeah.
Um, and learn seeing how the CPL is and seeing how different managers and different people work. I think I mean I'd love that opportunity again, but right now uh, there's a lot of value to and a lot of value that people don't see working in the trenches. We call it
Yeah.
working in the trenches. In the club system, and we've had a lot of great things happen in our club system. I know Vaughan Soccer Club. We've developed a
Hmm.
coach that went to Halifax, Patrice. We have Kamal Miller. We have Alistair Johnson, Ryan Raposo, Dane St. Clair. All these players that came through our system that we were very
Yeah.
proud of how they developed and the opportunities that we've given them. And there's more coming. Kamani Baines drafted number 4 in the MLS. All these things that happen, people need it. Without bums like me and other people in wherever you are in Quebec or Ontario, without bums like us, there's no movement. There's
Yeah.
no program. So, I think people appreciate that. Um, and I think people, it's a different type of appreciation. The appreciate things was when stuff like this happens, when Greg Vanny, calls you when he leaves and says, "Hey, thank you, thank you for helping throughout this," and those things, those little awards are a lot really important. Um,
Yeah.
do coaches have egos? Yeah. Do I have an ego? Yeah. Do I want to coach in the CPL, or was I aspiring when I was at TFC to be one day part of at least the top program? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah. So that's the complexity of of our
Yeah.
future. Yeah.
Ah, interesting. Well, I wish you all the best if something does come up and you have an opportunity and you can pursue it. Why not?
Yeah.
So, a couple little questions before we let you go. Your thoughts on the Azzurri and the Euros? What's your gut feeling? Can we repeat as champions, or you
I
think it's
don't.
gonna be the
It's going to be very difficult.
yeah,
I think Spalletti is a very very good coach. It's going to mean Barella getting to that next level of stardom. It's going to be Donnarumma being the goalkeeper he was in the last. For me, it's Scamacca. Is he ready to be the focal point? I'm not so sure. Defensively, we're very not necessarily young, but naive. We don't have a lot of players that have that experience.
yeah,
Um, at that level. So it's going to be a learning curve. But the Italians are the Italians. They know how to win. They know how to fight. They know how to battle, and they have the resilience. It's in their DNA. It's in our
yeah,
DNA. So you never count them out. You never
yeah?
count out that their mentality and their character is always going to be right.
And in the past, whenever the fans were skeptical of the roster and our expectations were not high, we tend to somehow come through and do better than expected. So we can only hope that will happen. Now, what about Canada and Copa America? We're going to be facing Argentina. That will be quite an experience for the team. But also playing in Copa America is going to be good to gain some experience and preparation for the World Cup in 2026. So, how do you think Canada will do in the Copa America?
I don't think it's a question of experience. I think it's a question of transition. I think it's a question of growth.
Mhm.
And you have to get results to grow. Their result against France was a growing moment. For me, it showed the world class abilities of a Kone, the abilities of a Bambito, who was gonna be the next one up anyway. And I know Jesse kind of made him, and it looked like Jesse put him in there, but
Right.
he was in Mauro's plans, like, and Mauro did a good job by him. I think that's it. I think it's growth, development, and you need results to do that. If Crapeau is good when he needs to be good,
Hmm.
that means when he needed to be good in those early moments against France, and these even against even against Trinidad, he was very good when he needed to be good. That's goalkeeping. You have to be good when you need to be good,
Yeah.
and Crapeau exemplifies that. Whether it's a cross, whether it's a through ball that he comes and attacks, all those things. So he's very important to. I'm looking at Argentina at getting a result. Um, I'm looking at the two wide players in this 4-2-2-2. Right now, he has Liam Miller and he has Tejan Buchanan, who will be very comfortable being inside in that pressing, that very narrow four, pressing in that very narrow four. I'm looking at Laren. You're Canada's leading scorer, but again, you have to be good when you have to be good. The chance he missed against France, but that beautiful goal he scores against Trinidad, these moments are going to be very important. And
Yeah.
Jonathan David being Jonathan David. Jonathan David is not a world class player by accident. Jonathan David is you watch him every day, And whether it's innate or whether it's learned, his
Yeah.
ability off the ball, his ability on the ball, he's a world class player, no questions asked. But they have to be world class players. And whether it's Jason Russell Rowe who complements Laren, it's whether it's Osorio, whether it's a Theo Bear, those guys that come into the mix, those guys are going to be very important in moments. But
Yeah.
getting a result against Argentina is very doable, very doable with this with that and with they grow on the last result and the last performance they had with the French, and
Yeah.
the first half performance they had against the Dutch. Um, but it's gonna have to be every moment. It's gonna be after every moment for Eustachio and Kone to
Yeah.
be very good defensively. So they're gonna have to be almost perfect. But and I'm not just saying against Argentina. I'm saying against Chile and Peru because those two are very good teams. Chile and Peru are very good teams. Obviously not of the ilk as an Argentina, but I think that would be disappointing if they did not fight to get out of their group.
Yeah. I agree. You're absolutely right. So I want to wish Jesse Marsch, Mauro Biello, and the whole national team the best of luck in the tournament, and hope. I don't expect them like to win every game, but at least compete. I think that's the least we can do. But now we should also push for results, like you said. We shouldn't be just content to participate. Now we should take the next step in our growth. So the last question, Carmen, this is a fun one. We ask all our guests. You had a hard day at work, you come home and you're having pasta for dinner. Are you having penne lisce or penne rigate?
I like the sauce inside the pasta, so the rigate, the righe make the
Yes.
difference for me.
Yes,
So
that's the right answer. You got it. We could continue being friends. I don't know why people buy penne lisce. I really don't. It's not the same.
nope, I agree.
Yeah. So, Carmen, thank you so much for taking the time. It was really an honor to meet you and talk to you about different topics. I really learned a lot. I hope our viewers will do the same. Best of luck with your career and your clubs going forward. And we just have a little outro video, but just stay in back and don't hang up. And I'll say bye to you offline. So thanks again. And everyone, please subscribe to the channel, share our content with the local soccer show, amateur clubs across the country to make soccer better for everyone. Thank you for joining us.